Jackson's heart tugged the brim of his baseball cap lower as he stepped through the glass doors of the Golden Hearth Bakery and Grill in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The air was thick with the scent of cinnamon and browned butter, aromas that once wrapped themselves around his childhood like a warm blanket. But today the smell felt different. Off, like walking into an old home you once loved, only to find every picture frame tilted slightly wrong, every familiar corner somehow unwelcoming. The glass display case bore smudges of fingerprints dulled by time. Streaks of caramel clung to the marble counter like neglected memories, marks of carelessness, of pride misplaced. To most customers, these were invisible details, but not to Jackson. To him, each stain screamed one truth. This place had long since lost its soul. Behind the counter, a teenage girl leaned against the pastry rack, eyes glued to her phone, oblivious to the world around her. Time, customers, the very essence of hospitality, all ignored. For anyone else, it might have passed as a momentary lapse. But for Jackson, the man whose family name adorned the signage of over 600 Golden Hearth stores across the country, it felt like betrayal. Like being stabbed in the chest by your own legacy. He had started this brand with nothing more than a wooden cart and a dream, selling slices of his mother's pie at local fairs. Every piece was a promise, every customer a bond of trust. But this store in Scranton had been a red flag for weeks. High margins, suspiciously low ingredient cost, yet not a single customer complaint. The silence was louder than sirens. And in business, silence is rarely innocent. "I'll have a slice of the classic apple pie," Jackson said, keeping his tone easy, casual. Just another traveler passing through. He handed over a $10 bill, noting how the cashier barely glanced at him. One hand tapped the register, the other slid change across the counter without so much as a smile or eye contact, let alone the welcome to Golden Hearth greeting ingrained in every employee during training. Strike one. He took his receipt and quietly made his way to a small table by the window, a spot with a clear view of the kitchen and dining area. No one noticed him. Just like the 5 other cities he'd visited this month, his appearance, faded jeans, plain t-shirt, and 2 days' worth of stubble, allowed him to melt into the lunch rush. No curious glances, no recognition, not even when the girl called out, "Number 42." But inside him a storm was already beginning to churn. Jackson stood, retrieved his tray. On it, a pristine white plate cradled a slice of apple pie, golden lattice crust, a soft glaze shimmered over the top, and a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream gently melting at its edge. On the outside it looked perfect, the kind of dessert he had spent 2 decades perfecting in his mother's modest kitchen, but as he brought the plate closer, his trained senses flared. Something was wrong. That scent, which should have danced with fresh apple, melting butter, and warm spice, carried an artificial note, slight but undeniable, like synthetic perfume trying to mask something rotten. With fingers that had known the texture of real pastry for years, he gently slid the fork through the crust. It cracked too easily. From the filling, it didn't cling. It oozed, a viscous, glistening sludge of pale gold that slithered from the slice. Not fruit, not comfort, but confession. A confession wrapped in sugar and baked in betrayal. He leaned in, eyes narrowing. No apple slices, no hand-layered fruit texture, just a mass of overly sweet, gelatinous sludge. It looked like third-rate canned syrup. He took a bite, and instantly his taste buds recoiled. Harshly sweet, with a chemical burn that lingered. A metallic aftertaste clung to the back of his throat. This wasn't just a bad pie. It was a lie, baked in sugar. Jackson had tasted every batch since he was 27. Blindfolded, he could still pick out the real one, but this wasn't his pie. It had no soul, no heritage, no honor. Forcing himself to swallow, He gently set down his fork. His hands steady, he lifted the plate, and there it was, tucked beneath the napkin, a faintly printed slip. Apple filling product, Liberty Orchard Imports. Jackson's eyes darkened. Liberty Orchard wasn't one of their authorized suppliers. Golden Hearth worked exclusively with 2 approved farms. Both family-run, both committed to fresh, hand-cut ingredients, a standard enshrined in every training manual and franchise contract. Any substitution, especially with unregulated low-cost filler, wasn't just a policy violation. It was grounds for immediate termination. His phone buzzed. A message from Dana, VP of Operations, and his silent partner in this undercover trip. "How's the pie?" Jackson responded instantly. "Fake. Pull all records on Liberty Orchard Imports." 3 dots. Then, "They're not one of ours." Jackson stared again at the tiny label. This wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. Someone had deliberately replaced the core product, the symbol of their brand, with something cheaper, and they'd gambled that no one would notice. But he had. He took a deep breath, steadying his heartbeat as he returned the counterfeit slice to the plate. 20 years ago, his mother had taught him to arrange apple slices in perfect rows. "A good pie stands on its own," she'd say. "A fake one collapses beneath its crust." And now, a lie had collapsed, laid bare on a plate stamped with his family's name. He slid the Liberty Orchard slip into his pocket, his eyes sweeping the dining room. The air felt drained, employees moved like sleepwalkers, customers ate in silence. No chatter, no laughter. Above them, the digital menu flickered with outdated promotions. Behind the counter, a young worker clumsily dumped ice into a bin with one hand while texting with the other. Another giggled at something on her phone, nudging a coworker near the cake display. No one noticed Jackson, and that's exactly why he could do what he needed to do. Leaning back, he turned on the voice recorder and whispered to himself. Observed potential food safety violations. Staff disengaged. Suspected unreported ingredient substitution. Scranton Unit, 12:47 p.m. His gaze shifted toward the frosted glass door in the back, emblazoned with the words, "Employees only." Behind that door was the person he had come to confront, Karen Paulson, the store manager. A 10-year veteran of Golden Hearth. He had reviewed her file that morning. 7 years of steady performance. But in the past year, sudden profit spikes, ingredient costs suspiciously low, 0 customer complaints, the kind of eerie calm that usually meant someone had found a way to beat the system and hide it. Another message from Dana. Liberty Orchard registered last year in Delaware. No food supply history. Legal rep listed, Charles Poulson. Jackson's jaw clenched. Another text followed. Kyron's brother. I'm checking financials. The truth was unraveling. This wasn't a rogue shipment, it was an operation. A front company built to sneak unregulated product through the back door, leveraging inside connections and corporate silence. A sleight of hand wrapped in clean numbers and suspicious quiet. If Charles was involved, Karen wasn't just a collaborator. She was the architect. A shadow moved behind the frosted glass, catching Jackson's attention. He slid his phone into his pocket and lifted his water cup, taking a slow sip like nothing was wrong. Then he waited. Seconds later, the door opened. A young employee, 19, maybe 20, stepped out, clipboard in hand. He walked to the register and whispered something. Both he and the cashier turned discreet glances toward Jackson. The curtain was starting to lift. Remaining calm, Jackson stood, cleared his tray, and approached the counter. "Could I get the store phone number?" he asked casually. The girl blinked, momentarily flustered. It's online," she murmured, pointing vaguely toward a wall display. Jackson nodded politely, pulled out his phone and quickly dialed a number he'd memorized years ago. From the back office, a landline phone began to ring. Peering through the narrow glass partition, he caught sight of a woman in her early 40s wearing the familiar burgundy cardigan of Golden Hearth. She answered the phone with polished ease. "This is Karen Polson. How can I help you?" Jackson dropped all pretense. "Karen, this is Jackson Hart. I'm sitting inside your restaurant. I need to speak with you now." On the other end, he heard her inhale sharply. "Excuse me, who is this?" "Table 4 by the window. You just served me a slice of pie made with filling from Liberty Orchard Imports. I don't believe that's an approved supplier. Come talk to me now." Through the glass, he saw her freeze mid-motion, her eyes scanning before landing on him. In that instant, it was as if someone had thrown an ice bucket over her. Jackson calmly raised his hand in a quiet wave, steady, composed, quietly authoritative. "Of course, Mr. Hart," she replied, her voice regaining composure. "I'll be right there." Jackson hung up and returned to his seat. His anger no longer felt explosive. It burned beneath the surface like embers in cold ash. Silent, yet intense. He straightened the napkin beside the plate, placed his phone face down, and waited. The pie had run over its crust. Now the truth would spill too. Karen Polson emerged from the office like a well-rehearsed actress on stage. Her blonde bob was meticulous, the burgundy cardigan buttoned neatly. But Jackson, seasoned by hundreds of board meetings and surprise interviews, recognized the tension around her eyes, the practiced smile that didn't reach her expression. "Mr. Hart," she said, steadying her voice though her breath came a bit too fast. "What a surprise! If only we had known." "You didn't," Jackson interrupted, motioning to the empty seat across from him. "Sit." Karen complied, but not without glancing toward the kitchen, where several employees paused mid-task, whispering among themselves, before one silently slipped into the walk-in cooler. He slid the pie plate across the table. "Go on, take a bite." Karen's brow furrowed. "Sir, that pie—" "Just taste it," he insisted. "And tell me what you notice." She hesitated, then speared a small piece and chewed deliberately, far longer than necessary. It's a bit sweeter than usual." "Maybe," she said carefully, "but pie batches do vary slightly." "No," Jackson replied coolly, "not if they follow the exact recipe. Not if they're made with the filling we've used since 2008, and definitely not if they're made with fresh-cut apples." Karen clenched her hands in her lap. "I assure you, Mr. Hart, our store adheres to Golden Hearth standards in every respect." Jackson reached into his pocket and placed the Liberty Orchard slip gently on the table. "Then explain this." Her eyes flicked down, then back to his face as she spoke quickly, as if working from a script. "We've had recent supply disruptions and costs have skyrocketed. Liberty Orchard offered a short-term substitute at a much lower price. There was no approval," Jackson said. "No notification to corporate, no update to our supplier list, and if I hadn't taken that first bite, you'd still be hiding it." Karen's tone tightened. It became firm, defensive. "It's been incredibly difficult. There were distribution problems, staffing shortages. I had to be flexible. I chose to keep the store running rather than let product spoil." "You chose," he repeated coldly, "to betray our product, our brand, my family's name. And you didn't even have the decency to tell us." She squared her shoulders. "I didn't lie. I was trying to survive. Apple filling prices rose nearly 60% since last fall. If I hadn't adjusted, I would have lost money. And instead," Jackson said, his voice flat, "you increased profits. I've seen the numbers. You didn't just survive, you thrived. You spent less, reported more, and did it so quietly that no one suspected a thing. Until now." Karen parted her lips, but no words came. Jackson leaned back, letting the silence amplify the weight of her decisions. "Karen," he said finally, "how long have you been using Liberty Orchard products?" 4 months, she admitted. "Only the apple filling?" She paused. She hesitated. "A few other items like brownie mix and canned cherries. But we used them sparingly." "You kept it hidden," Jackson interjected, correcting her. He then reached for his phone and tapped the screen. The recorder had already been on. He flipped the phone face down and placed it where both of them could see, its screen glowing like a cold, watchful eye. "We'll be testing pie samples today. If you have anything you want to add, any context. Now's the time." Karen stiffened, her gaze hardening like iron. "I think," she said slowly, emotion drained from her voice, "I'll wait to speak with my attorney." Jackson nodded deliberately. "That's your right." He picked up the plate, the Liberty Orchard slip, and gently slipped both into a zippered evidence pouch. The restaurant hummed around them, clinking spoons, murmurs, the low grind of an espresso machine. But time seemed to freeze at their table. Every tick of the clock stood still, because the truth was about to emerge. "You'll be hearing from us very soon." His voice was low, calm, but carried the resonance of a storm warning. "In the meantime, do not alter anything. No records, no evidence. And don't warn anyone down the line." Karen didn't speak. She just watched him walk away. Her jaw tightened until her cheekbones stood sharp. Jackson paced toward the door. As he passed, he paused and spoke quietly, even softly, but with a blade-like precision. "And Karen," he said over his shoulder, voice gentle yet cutting, "if your profits are built on lies, I hope they don't collapse as quickly as your pie filling will." He stepped outside into the chill Pennsylvania air, his coat collar up. Hands in pockets, phone in one hand, he moved forward with the silent resolve of a warrior. The crust had cracked, the filling had spilled. Jackson Hart had made the first bite, and a reckoning had begun. The hotel suite smelled of stale espresso and printer toner. Jackson paced the room, phone pressed to his ear. On the coffee table lay the sealed pouch, containing a slice of pie, the Liberty Orchard slip, and the last vestige of trust he'd placed in Karen. Dana's voice came through the line, urgent, precise. "We confirmed it. Liberty Orchard is a front. Funds trace back to a Delaware holding company using Karen's brother Charles's address. No food service licenses, no FDA filings. They've existed only 18 months. Jackson rubbed his brow, tension coiling in his nerves. So the company was created for one purpose, to secretly funnel inferior product through the back door. "And that's not all," Dana continued. "Compliance flagged the label you found. The product code matches a sample we rejected last year. It contained excessive sulfites and an unauthorized thickening agent, not legal for U.S. food service." Jackson froze mid-step. "You mean Karen served pie with filling that fails FDA standards?" "Relentlessly. For 4 months," Dana confirmed softly, quietly, "every day." Jackson filled a glass with water from the minibar. His eyes fell on the amber-colored filling in the plastic pouch, seemingly innocuous, nostalgic, yet now revealed as deception and danger. "I want complete lab analysis," he said, voice steady. "Full component breakdown, preservatives, any deviations from spec. Drop everything. Get the lab team here now." "They're on their way. Under an hour," Dana replied. True to her word, 45 minutes later came a knock. Jackson opened the door to Dr. Elena Mee, Golden Hearth's senior food scientist, wheeling in a black case that looked like medical gear. "You must mean business," she said, already putting on sterile gloves. Jackson handed her the pouch. This isn't just subpar. It may be artificially manufactured, possibly hazardous. We don't know its origin. Decked with quiet efficiency. Pipettes, slides, a portable spectrometer. In silence, she cut a portion of the filling and placed it in the scanner. "What are we comparing this to?" she asked. "Recipe 3.7, Jackson responded. "The company-wide SPO standard since 2011, real fruit, no synthetic thickeners, no heavy preservatives." "Huh?" The machine hummed, data streaming. Finally, Dr. Me turned the display toward him. 2 graphs appeared. One baseline, one sample. "You don't need a lab coat to read this," she said softly. "Protein levels are off by 38%. Natural sugars replaced almost entirely with industrial-grade glucose. And this," she pointed at a bright red alert spot, "carboxymethyl cellulose. It's banned in food served to children under 12. Jackson exhaled deeply. "In plain language, this isn't food," Dr. Me said, her tone grave. "It's engineered chemistry posing as pie, and if customers have been eating it for months, we're looking at something far bigger than fraud." "Nothing she says will change the fact that you hid it," Jackson corrected, then tapped his phone. The recorder had been on quietly. He flipped it face down in plain sight, its glow like a watchful eye. "We're sending that pie for testing today. Anything else you want to share for context?" "Now's your only chance." Karen stiffened, her face hardening. "I'll wait for my attorney," she replied, emotion drained from her voice. Jackson nodded, cool and authoritative. "That is your right." He pocketed the plate and the Liberty Orchard label, placing both into a sealed evidence pouch. All around them, life in the restaurant carried on. Spoons chinking against dishes, the espresso machine's low hum. But at their table, time stopped. The pause felt sacred, as if the building itself held its breath before the truth erupted. "You'll hear from us soon," Jackson said, his voice even yet edged with warning. "In the meantime, do not change anything. Keep all records intact, and don't warn anyone else." Karen remained silent, watching him leave the table. Her clenched jaw spoke more than words could. Pausing before exiting, Jackson looked back once. His tone was soft, but it cut sharply. "And Karen," he said, voice trailing like a blade, "if your profits are built on lies, you better hope they don't collapse as fast as your pie filling." He stepped out into the chilly Pennsylvania air, phone in one hand, the other buried in his coat. He moved with quiet determination. Each step a declaration of war. The crust had cracked, the filling had leaked, and Jackson Hart had taken the first bite. Hotel room later. The suite smelled of stale espresso and printer ink. Jackson paced, phone at his ear. On the table lay the sealed pouch pie slice, Liberty Orchard label, and the last trace of trust he had left for Karen. Dana's voice came over the line, urgent and precise. "We've confirmed it. Liberty Orchard is a front. The payments trace back to a Delaware holding company listed at Charles Polson's address. No food owner license, no FDA registration. It's only been in existence for 18 months. Jackson pressed his palm to his forehead, feeling every nerve fray. "So they created a company solely to funnel fake product through our back door." "There's more," Dana continued. "The product code on that label matches a test sample we rejected last year. Excess sulfites and an unauthorized thickening agent, recalled by the FDA." Jackson stopped pacing. "Meaning Karen's been serving substandard pie filling for months?" "Yes, 4 months continuously." Jackson poured himself a glass of water, his gaze landing on the amber filling in the sealed pouch, harmless looking, familiar, but now revealed as dangerous deception. "I want a full lab analysis, all components, preservatives, Anything off-spec. Freeze every other project and bring the QA team here immediately. I've already scheduled it, Dana answered. They'll be on site within the hour. True to her word, a soft knock came 45 minutes later. Jackson opened the door to Dr. Elena Mee, Golden Hearth's lead food scientist, wheeling in a medical-grade case. Urgent? She asked, slipping on gloves. He handed her the pouch. This is not just poor quality. It may be a chemically engineered filler. Hazardous. Untraceable. Dr. May worked methodically. Pipettes, slides, a portable spectrometer. Quiet precision. She took a portion of the filling and scanned it. What's the reference? She asked. Recipe 3.7, Jackson replied. Our national standard since 2011, real fruit, no synthetic thickeners or high-density preservatives. The machine hummed. 2 graphs appeared on the screen. Dr. Mee turned it toward him. You don't need a lab coat, she said gently. Protein content is off by 38%. Natural sugars replaced almost entirely with industrial-grade glucose. And this, she pointed to a glaring red anomaly. Carboxymethylcellulose. It's banned in foods served to children under 12. Jackson exhaled. Slow, heavy. Evan paused, hesitating. I don't handle orders myself. She's very secretive. But I've seen delivery vans without Golden Hearth logos. Jackson leaned in gently. And if there were concerns about quality, who did you report them to? She told us to keep things in-house. Said it would strengthen team cohesion. Evan lowered his voice. Carlos, the former assistant manager. He raised concerns once, then had his hours slashed. He quit 2 weeks later. Jackson offered a respectful nod and moved back to the office. Everything was becoming clearer. Liberty Orchard wasn't a one-time mistake. It was an entire system, a parallel operation designed to siphon profits and erode brand integrity under the radar. Dana's voice crackled in his earpiece again. You need to see this. We just flagged 4 more stores. Same invoice pattern. Same shell game trick. All reporting up to Polson. Jackson stared at the screen. Listed locations included Altoona, Bethlehem, and 2 stores just outside Pittsburgh. All posted perfect profits. All used Liberty Orchard as their secret supplier. She didn't just replace the filling, Jackson said quietly. She replaced the whole system. And now it's time to cut it open, slice by slice. Employee break room. The stale air hung thick with sweet air freshener, like perfume covering the stench of half-baked schemes. Jackson sat at the end of the table, clipboard in hand, his quality auditor badge pinned to his shirt. Over 2 hours, he invited each day-shift employee into a private room for what he called a routine quality audit. But one by one, a pattern emerged, polished, almost rehearsed responses. No supplier issues here. We love working here. Miss Polson is very professional. It was like reading from a training handbook or lines memorized for a play. A few younger employees avoided eye contact entirely. Jackson took polite notes and waited for the next person. Finally, a timid young woman entered. She adjusted her apron, her backpack still hanging off one shoulder. Her name tag said, Tasha. Her posture spoke volumes. She was new and afraid. 3 weeks, she replied quietly, when asked how long she'd worked there. This is my first real job, she added. Jackson softened his tone. Is the training like what you were told in orientation? Tasha hesitated. I don't really know. I don't have anything to compare it against. Jackson leaned forward, voice soft. Tasha, everything you share here stays anonymous. This is just to understand what's really going on. Her fingers tightened on her backpack strap. Miss Polson, she has a way of knowing everything. What do you mean? Tasha glanced toward the door, as if afraid of being overheard. She said everything stays in-house, that corporate doesn't want to be bothered with small stuff. Last week she had us sign what she called confidentiality agreements, but it didn't feel right. Do you remember what was in them? Just that we're not allowed to talk about operations with outsiders. No social posts, no customer conversations about ingredients, no discussion of suppliers, even with family, Jackson recalled softly. He paused, locking eyes with her. What happens if someone speaks up? Tasha swallowed hard. There was a guy named James working back of house. He joked once that the filling tasted weird. 2 days later, he was moved to cleaning bathrooms and cut down to a 4-hour schedule. And what happened to him? Just disappeared. Nobody heard from him again. Jackson drummed his pen thoughtfully on the clipboard, voice calm. Do you know who delivers the filling now? Tasha nodded slowly. It's not a Golden Hearth truck. It's a white van with no logo. Comes early Tuesday and Friday mornings. We're not allowed in the kitchen then. Miss Polson accepts it herself. Jackson leaned back, the pieces assembling in his mind faster than he could write them down. Has anyone tried to report this to corporate? Yes, she said, voice dropping. Carlos did. He called the ethics hotline once. 2 days later, Paulson said he was transferred, but Dion from the kitchen found his uniform in the trash. Jackson was silent for a long moment, and after that, everyone quieted down. Dion pretends nothing happened. Marcus just keeps his head down. We've been told to focus on the line and stay silent. He rose and smiled gently. Thank you, Tasha. As she stood, she paused and asked quietly, Is something wrong, sir? Jackson offered a small, reassuring smile. We're here to find that out. She turned and laughed, leaving him alone with his notes. A portrait of silent fear, invisible control, and a tangled web of deception enforced by confidentiality agreements, not meant for compliance, but for intimidation. A soft knock interrupted Marcus's footsteps. The young supervisor peeked in. A delivery arrived early. One of the special shipments? Jackson glanced at his watch. Today's Thursday, not a delivery day. Thank you, he said calmly, rising to his feet. Let's see what they've sent outside the schedule. Passing the counter, he caught Tasha's gaze. She didn't speak, but her eyes, wide and quietly hopeful, told him she understood. Finally, someone had come who wasn't afraid to dig beneath the surface. 15 minutes early, a white paneled truck with no logo, a worn, aging vehicle, pulled up. The back door clattered open halfway. Jackson edged closer to the prep area, clipboard in hand, blending into the work rhythm around him. Karen stood nearby, expression unreadable, her demeanor sharp and reserved. She gave Jackson a curt nod, no smile, only calculated reserve. As the driver unloaded crates, Karen issued a terse command. Everyone stay up front. This won't take more than 5 minutes. Silently, Jackson moved to the walk-in cooler. One of the crates bore the black ink label, Low 3821, the same code he had flagged the day before. Karen pushed the crate inside and locked the cooler door. No one else reacted. No one asked questions. She reappeared at the counter, smoothing her apron before turning to Marcus. Take over the register. I'm heading to the office. Jackson stepped forward. May I review today's delivery paperwork? She blinked slowly. It's already in the system. I'd like to see a printed copy, he said, tone polite. It's standard QA procedure. It's not necessary, she replied evenly, neither rude nor welcoming, simply final. He stared at her quietly for a moment. Karen Polson, I need to speak with you privately, just 10 minutes. She exhaled, forcing a smile, then motioned for him to follow her to the employee lounge. Once the door closed behind them, Jackson reached into his back pocket and pulled out a badge. Not his QA pass, but the real one. Founder and CEO of Golden Hearth. He placed it face up on the table. Karen's face remained calm at first. Then she looked down at the badge, back at him, then at the card again. Color drained from her cheeks. Her hands clenched into fists on her lap, knuckles whitening. "I thought you looked familiar," she whispered, "but not familiar enough." "Now you know who I am," Jackson said softly, no fanfare. The fryer clicked on in the distance, the microwave slamming shut. Operations continued beyond the door, unaware that inside this room, foundations were beginning to shift. How long? 6 months, 9, does it matter? Her voice was tight. "I did what I had to do to keep this place running. You did what you had to do to boost profit." The cost of ingredients skyrocketed, she shot back, but reimbursements didn't. HQ demanded consistency but gave no flexibility. "And then what?" Jackson asked, voice cold. "No complaints, because customers trusted us. They trusted this brand, trusted me. And you replaced real apples with syrup, unapproved thickeners, preservatives that wouldn't even pass in school cafeterias." She didn't answer. Her eyes returned to the ID badge once more. "You could have just called, made an appointment, but you chose disguise, to play hero." "It's not about me," Jackson replied. "It's about 12 branches I've verified. The duplicate invoices, the fake supplier, the shell accounts, employees silenced with bogus NDAs, the atmosphere of fear, the lies." Her lips thinned into a line. "You don't understand what it's been like out here," she murmured. "You're right," Jackson replied quietly. "I don't know what it's like to risk customer health just to protect a bonus." Karen sprang to her feet, the sudden move a final act of defiance. "If this is when you're going to fire me, go ahead," she spat. "But don't pretend you're doing it for justice. You're doing it because I ran this store better than you ever thought possible." Jackson remained seated, his voice unshakably calm, like bedrock in a raging river. "You're not wrong. You turned this operation into a smooth, profitable machine. But the thing about shortcuts, they always bring you where you don't want to go. And now, we've arrived." A knock interrupted them. Marcus, the young supervisor, entered, visibly tense. "Sorry to interrupt, but a woman from headquarters, Dana, is here, with 3 others. Karen's eyes widened slightly. "Security, 3, and legal representation." Jackson stood and thanked Marcus, speaking clearly. "Gather all employees. We're closing the store temporarily." He exited, leaving behind Karen's simmering glare, equal parts fury, betrayal, and maybe fear. In the front of the store, Dana stood by the entrance, documents in hand, flanked by 3 legal representatives. A few customers were being politely escorted out, given refunds and vouchers for future visits. Jackson stepped forward, filling the hushed space with his voice. "I'm Jackson Hart, founder and CEO of Golden Hearth. Effective immediately, this branch is closed for an internal audit." Employees paused in their tracks. Several gasped. Tasha stood behind the counter, hand to her mouth, her eyes wide and confused. "You're not in trouble," he continued. "Most of you had no idea what was happening, but we now have proof of large-scale fraud, illegal ingredients, falsified paperwork, and organized concealment. Everything starts now." Dana stepped forward to clarify. "All staff will be interviewed in the coming days and placed on paid administrative leave. Those who fully cooperate will keep their jobs. Those who knowingly took part will not." Jackson turned to see Karen emerging from the back, no longer defiant, but cornered and defeated. She opened her mouth, then thought better of it. Words couldn't fix what had been done. He addressed the staff again. "If any of you ever wondered whether someone was watching or listening, you were right. We've always been here. We just weren't listening closely enough." Silence filled the room, not of fear, but of quiet calm. before the storm passed and something better took its place. 3 months later, reopening, Jackson stood inside the freshly renovated Scranton branch. A tray of golden apple pies emerged from the convection oven. The aroma, buttery, crisp crust, real cinnamon, and the soft, ripe warmth of fresh fruit. Everything had changed. The frosted windows were gone, replaced by clear glass facing the kitchen. Stainless counters gleamed. Each prep station featured bright red QR labels linking to live traceability. There were no secrets behind the line anymore. That was the point. Dion, now wearing a burgundy manager polo, wiped his hands. "Sales are up 32%, he reported. "Our loyalty program brought nearly all our regulars back." Jackson smiled. They came back for more than pie. They came back for trust. Tasha, now assistant manager, led a group of high school students into the kitchen. She explained the difference between natural and artificial thickeners. Jackson nodded to her, then stepped forward. "This pie," he told the students, "is the first recipe my mother taught me. She believed people can taste truth. If you cheat, they'll know, even if they don't understand why." He held up a fresh slice, the latticed crust gleaming with cinnamon. "A few months ago we discovered some stores were selling something that looked like this. Cheaper, faster, but fake." A student raised a hand. "Did you catch them?" Jackson paused, then said, "Yes, and they were held accountable. But the bigger question is, how did this happen?" The students hung on his every word. "We stopped checking, we stopped listening, and those who spoke up were ignored." He glanced at Tasha and Dion and nodded. "That's why we changed the whole system: recipe, process, people, and culture." Dana entered holding a tablet. "Final rulings are in. Karen Paulson, 6 years in prison for fraud, obstruction of justice, and food safety violations. Her brother's facility permanently shut down. Other managers got between 2 and 5 years. Full restitution ordered." Jackson nodded. "Good, not just for us, but for the customers we betrayed." Dana replied, "Media are calling this a case study. They say our response sets a new industry standard." But Jackson wasn't thinking of headlines. He was remembering the older gentleman from that morning who'd taken a slice before his wife's appointment. He'd smiled when he took the first bite and said, "That's the one. I wasn't imagining it." That was what mattered. And a quiet promise not to let it slip again. That evening, staff reunion. The team gathered in a semicircle inside the store, exhausted but beaming, each holding a paper cup. 6 months ago, Jackson began, this store was in crisis, not from bad luck, but because people forgot who we were. He paused. But some of you didn't forget. Some of you spoke up. Some of you held the line. He pulled the cloth from behind the counter to reveal a plaque placed at eye level. "Integrity is the ingredient you can't fake." Applause erupted. Jackson felt something in his chest ease, not relief, but redemption. On his way out, he passed Tasha, organizing the volunteer log from the school visit. "Have you learned anything new?" he asked. She looked up and smiled. That we're not just baking, we're keeping a promise." Jackson smiled back and stepped out into the cool night air, pausing beneath the glowing golden hearth sign. In business, as in life, shortcuts may look like solutions, but the cost of deception doesn't show on spreadsheets. It shows up in lost trust, in silenced voices, in quiet harm. The lesson is simple. You can fake ingredients, you can fake numbers, but you can't fake integrity. Sooner or later, the truth comes out. And the ones who held the line are the ones rebuilding